Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Rockville and Gaithersburg. Welcome to this episode of a gubernatorial candidate's Kibbitzing with Kagan. With me today is Maryland's former Attorney General and candidate for governor, Doug Gansler. Doug, thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedule to chat with me today.
Good morning. There's no one with whom I'd rather kibitz than you, Senator. Thank you.
I love that. So we're going to start, Doug, with giving you 1 minute to tell about your background and why you're running for governor. You may begin.
Thank you. I grew up in Maryland. I went to Cherry Chase Elementary and have really wandered not far from here. And I've always been interested in public service. My mother was a teacher in Montgomery County schools. My father was the Undersecretary of Defense of the United States. I was an assistant United States attorney as a federal prosecutor. I ran for state's attorney, as you remember, back in 1998 and served 2 terms there. And then 2 terms as Maryland's attorney general. And I was also president of all the attorneys general of the United States. And then I ran for governor and unfortunately lost after 16 years of winning. I lost that election. During COVID, I had time for reflection, and I thought, hey, what am I doing? I love helping people. I'm going to get back in the public service, and here I am.
Okay, you've got a little more time if you'd like.
Well, that's okay. I mean, look, I think we're in a crisis situation. We'll talk about it, but I think we're in a crisis situation in the pandemic, and politically, we're in a crisis because we need a Democrat that can actually win the general election. So here I am.
There we go. All right. So we're going to do these in a bunch of different categories, and we're going to start off with childhood. You talked about some of those. So the first question was, where did you grow up? But you covered that. Do you have siblings, and where are you in the birth order?
I have a sister, and she's older than I am, and she is actually lives in Atlanta, Georgia. Her husband is the writer for the Atlantic Journal-Constitution, and they are very liberal folks, and which is very difficult in Georgia.
Yeah.
And I'm the younger one, and I'm the younger brother.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But they've got Stacey Abrams to look up to there. So
they do, and they do.
All right. Did you have a pet growing up?
I did. A dog named Rodney. And I had him from when I was 6 years old. He was a yellow lab until I was 23. He lived a long time, and I cried like a baby when he died. And now I have Jack the dog, and Jack and I are very close.
All right. Were you a good student as a child?
I'm like, kind of like life. You win some, you lose some. I did fairly well, and well enough, and ended up going to Yale University and Virginia Law School, and so it worked out okay.
All right. Who was your favorite teacher and why?
Well, in hindsight, it would have to be Mrs. Yondorf, and she was strict, and I needed a little strict back then. And I believe my desire to read actually comes from her. I started a book club, in fact, 31 years ago.
Wow.
And only missed 2 sessions. We meet every month. I only missed 2 in those 31 years. And I attribute that in much reason to Mrs. Yondorf and her getting me to read.
And what grade was that?
That was 9th grade.
19. Okay. What was your favorite television show as a kid?
Probably the Flintstones, because it was light, and Barney Rubble is a great actor, so it worked out.
As a child, what was your earliest career aspiration?
I've always wanted to be in politics. I started working on Capitol Hill when I was 13 years old. I believed in it. My parents were in it, and public servants, and so I used to go down after school, and I interned for Birch Bayh, who was a senator from Indiana, for 2 years. Then I worked for Bill Bradley, and this was when I was in high school. So always believed in public service and still do.
That's fantastic. Tell us about a mentor when you were young, other than Mrs. Yondorf. And yeah.
Well, I guess my father was definitely my mentor, and it's interesting. He passed away about a year ago, and to this minute, I don't know if he was a Democrat or Republican. He would just did things for the right reason, could articulate it for the right reason, was in public service, and a very, very, very smart person. And still today, people come up to me all the time and tell me different stories about my dad and how he influenced their lives. So I'd have to say him. And then in politics, Senator Joe Tidings later. He was very helpful to me.
Lovely. We're shifting to hobbies. What is your favorite sport to play or watch?
That's an easy one for me, lacrosse. And it's Maryland's team sport officially.
Yep.
And played since I was young. I played at Yale. I played professionally. I play still. I played 2 nights ago. I'm 58 years old and play up in Howard County for a team called Mr. Bose out of Baltimore. And old man lacrosse is great.
All right.
So I still
Did you pick up any new hobbies during COVID?
walking. I actually used to think, well, when walking becomes my exercise, then that means I'm really old. But I've been walking about 7 miles a day, and so I think that would have to be my new sort of hobby, if you will.
All right. Fundraising phone calls while you walk, I bet.
Right.
Other than Kibbitzing with Kagan, which I know must be your favorite, do you have a
Absolutely.
favorite podcast that you'd like to recommend to folks?
I don't. Because as you said, fundraising. I'm a keeper and toucher. I spend my time in the car on the phone, so I don't get to really listen to podcasts much. I did enjoy Rachel Maddow. The last one I listened to was Rachel Maddow's Bagman about corruption in Maryland, which reminded me that we had it then and still have it now. We need to fix that.
Yes. Have you binged a TV show recently that you'd like to recommend?
The mayor of Eastwick or Easton, I guess it's based on Easton, Pennsylvania, was great. I just finished watching that, and that was really good. Kate Winslow, but yes, I mean, like everybody, we've watched a lot, and I still think The Wire, to me, was the best binge show I've ever watched.
I am probably the only Marylander that has who has never watched an episode. I need to do that at some point.
You will appreciate it deeply.
Okay.
And it's genuine and real. As someone who's a prosecutor forever, it struck a chord.
Right. We're going to shift to the arts now. What is your favorite genre of music?
Country. So I listen to a lot of country music, Toby Keith, and whatever. I just listen to country music all the time.
Okay. Do you have a favorite song or an anthem that inspires you or lifts you up?
I would say Toby Keith's "Beer for My Horses." It's a justice. It's all about justice, and in the old school way. So I'd have to say that.
Huh. Doesn't sound like a justice song. All right. What is your favorite arts venue?
My favorite arts venue. I actually like. I don't know that I have one. I think I like art shows, sort of outdoor art shows where you can sort of get a panoply of different artists and get to talk to the artists. So I'd have to say that I did go through a Rodin period when I was into sort of existentialism after high school. But I think other than that, I would have to say just pop-up shows.
Okay. So as someone who used to have a radio show, Curtain Call with Cheryl Kagan with Broadway musicals, tell us some of your favorite Broadway musicals, up to 5.
Well, the first one I saw was The Wiz, which I loved. And then I saw the Bruce Springsteen show recently, which I really liked. Hamilton, I'm sure everybody who's on this is going to say that, but I did my do it. It was just it was wonderful. And Evan Hansen, I think I saw that, and I really enjoyed that. And I think I'm going to go with just ticket 4.
Good. Those are good ones. Is there a book that has had a meaningful impact on your life?
I would say, I sort of touched on it a little bit ago. Crime and Punishment, in some way. At the time I read it, I graduated a semester early from high school and went and lived in Uruguay and worked at a leather belt factory down there and designed a course in existentialism with one of my teachers. And I started with Crime and Punishment, and it might be why I ended up being a prosecutor for 22 years and really enjoyed that book. And I just read a book from actually a guy that was in the class with me at Yale, called A Gentleman in Moscow, which is by Amor Tolls, which I thought was one of the best books I've read in recent times, just the way in which it was written. So it's also Russian, about Russia by American.
Okay. The next category we're shifting to is personal. What is the biggest risk you've ever taken in your life?
I would say when I was in 8th grade, I went down to Spingarn High School in Washington, D.C. to run in the Junior Olympics. And there was a lot of racial tension at the time because of busing at Chevy Chase Elementary. There was in Rosemary Hills, there was these issues. And I didn't really know what that meant. I was very young. And then I went down to Spingarn and there were a lot of hundreds and hundreds of African-American kids my age. And I was the only white kid there. And I didn't want to get out of the car, and I did, and it was one of the most wonderful days I ever had. So I think that sort of stands out in my mind.
Thank you for sharing that story. Have you ever broken a bone, and how?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a wimp. So I really haven't broken many bones. I broke a bone playing football in eighth grade, and it's kind of the only bone in my hand, and it's the only bone I broke. I separated my shoulder against Boston College my senior year at playing lacrosse, but those are the only two sort of major injuries.
Okay. Do you speak any language or languages other than English?
Sí, señora, habla español con fluencia, más o menos.
Ah, muy bien. All right. That's awesome. Where did you learn?
Well, like I said, I graduated especially early from high school in Uruguay, and I
Uruguay.
didn't know anyone in the country or the continent, and so I had to learn how to speak Spanish. And then I'd been taken in school, and then I lived with a family in Spain for a summer as well in high school. And now I just practice at Chipotle. You know,
Come to District 17. You'll have a lot of opportunities to use it anytime.
I will.
What was the first car you ever bought, you ever owned, and how old were you?
It was ugly. It was a Cutlass, and one of those two-tone deals. I got it. It was a cast off of my parents, and it was gray with like the maroon kind of top, with red velour seats in it. It was about as ugly as you can imagine.
Sounds it.
And, we called it a hoopty back then, and it was sort of popped up and down. It was pretty bad. So
And
that
how
was
old, how old were you?
I was in college, so probably toward 21 or so.
Tell us about your first crush or your first love.
Margie Koenig in maybe sixth grade, and I would bike up and down in front of her house, and she had no time for me whatsoever.
Okay. What's something that really ticks you off?
Donald Trump.
Okay. Tell us about your kids.
So I have two boys. One's 27 and one's 24, and they're great kids. I want to come back as them. You asked me earlier who my mentors are, and I think it's my children. They're great. One works at Hyperloop out. They both went to Penn, University of Pennsylvania, and the older one works at Hyperloop, which is the Elon Musk company. They shoot the people through the tubes at 800 miles an hour, and he's been there since graduating. And the other one's been at Facebook for the last couple of years.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Something important you learned from one of your parents.
I'd have to, I mentioned public service, what I think is there. I guess just to be civil and nice to everybody and understand everybody's different backgrounds and everybody has something to offer. And so, when I went to college, for example, I used to go up to the person that was the sort of the quietest, and one thing my dad told me is when I was young was the coolest kid is the guy that actually goes up and talks to the seemingly least cool kid and talks to them and learns from them. And I've always sort of tried to operate in that method.
Nice. That's lovely. At home is the next category. What is your favorite junk food?
Captain Crunch cereal, probably peanut butter crunch.
Okay. What is your least favorite food? Something you just won't eat?
Liver.
Okay.
And I think it's because my parents used to shove it in my mouth when I was young. You had to close your eyes and here comes the choo-choo train. It was just gross.
Now, what about pate or chopped liver? None of it?
I stay off of it. Because of that, I think it was a very memorable, horrifying experience.
Trauma. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is something you cook really well?
Spaghetti, with Mueller's noodles and Prego sauce, which I've actually sort of graduated to Rao and with the spicy kind, but that's about all I cook well.
All right. What is your least favorite household chore?
Cleaning.
All of it.
All of it.
Okay. God forbid, Doug, your house is on fire. Other than people and pets, what would you seek to rescue?
I don't know. There's nothing. A painting. I have an original Calder painting. I think I tried to save that. But other than that, I really don't have anything not too much on the stuff. I mean, I collect a lot of stuff, but nothing more for sentimental purposes than anything else.
Okay. Okay. The next category is travel. What is the best vacation you've ever taken? Where did you go?
I think driving cross country. After school, I drove out to California with one buddy. We drove through the southern route, and then coming back, I drove through the northern route. And actually, it was in 1984. It was after junior year. Went out to California because I worked for Gary Hart, and I ran Gary Hart's campaign for president at Yale, but then also co-chaired in Connecticut. And we went out and spent the time out in California at the convention in San Francisco. And but the drive out and the drive back, I think, were just seeing our country and the different people in it, the different little towns and hamlets. I think created a big impression on me.
Nice. What is the favorite place in Maryland that you've discovered that maybe others may not be familiar with?
Yeah, well, so this is my fourth time running statewide, so I've seen every nook and cranny of the state. There's just so many wonderful places. I would have to say Chestertown is one of the sort of pops into mind as like a quaint sort of symbolic of so many nice towns that we have in Maryland, and that's in Kent County, the Eastern Shore. So I'll go with that.
Good. Do you have a favorite bar or restaurant in Maryland?
I was at Tia Ketta last night in Bethesda, and so I go there and quite often. And but all of Bethesda. I grew up with Bethesda having Giffords Ice Cream and Lowen's toy store, and now it's got 220 restaurants, more than Washington stuff. So I think sort of the Bethesda area is really where I spend a lot of time. And then, of course, Bethesda Crab House, because I love crabs.
There you go. Good Marylander. If neither money nor COVID were an object, where would you want to travel in the world?
I love Maine. And so I go to Maine every summer. And so I call it my New England freeload trip. I go and freeload with my friends up and down the East Coast and landing in Maine and freeload there. But I have to say that, and if I had to go somewhere more international, I'd say Scandinavia. It's beautiful. People, speak English better than I do. There's not a lot of. It's not crowded, and it's old and very nostalgic.
Nice. What is something you always bring with you when you travel?
My passport, there's nothing really in particular. I overpack, but no, there's nothing really in particular that I bring other than my passport, I think.
Okay. Traveling light.
Yes.
We're shifting to social media. So I know, right? You've got your two sons are both techies, so we got to see how Dad does on this.
Yeah, not so good.
We've already learned this earlier in
Yes.
setting up this podcast, but tell us what percentage of Facebook posts or tweets you write yourself.
Probably about, in substance and in general, I probably write half at least, but then they get changed because I don't know how many characters you can have and what, and of course I might be inappropriate or who knows. So yes.
Okay. Which is your favorite social media platform and why?
Facebook, because it connects people, and because my son works there. But it also, I just think it's a great tool that's brought a lot of people together, and there's so many different parts of it that seem to work, with the groups and bring people that are like-minded, and then it's challenging sort of the legal issues. As one of the things I do in my real life is I represent companies that have that work with attorneys general around the country, and Facebook has had some interesting ups and downs with them.
For sure. We are shifting to politics now. Who knew?
Yeah.
First question, why are you a Democrat?
I like all the rest of the stuff before politics. I'm a Democrat because I think Democrats are there to help people that need government, and the values of the Democrats are what I subscribe. I remember when I spearheaded the marriage equality effort in Maryland, writing an opinion recognizing out-of-state same-sex marriage in Maryland, and I literally, you were there. They had impeachment proceedings against me for doing so. I was like, I never understood the other side. And so I don't really understand the other side on so many of these issues. And obviously recently we had the issue with choice in Texas. And I was like, who does that? And why do people want to stop letting people vote? And I think it's democratic values and principles.
Good for you. Have you ever been disappointed or disagreed in a significant manner with the Democratic leader or the Democratic Party?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. And, I think we're having this battle right now within the Democratic Party, this sort of what's labeled as the far left versus the moderates. And I don't like to really label myself. People perceive me as being moderate because I've been a prosecutor and I think jobs are good. But on the other hand, I started the first civil rights department in the state and history, and I ran Senator Obama's campaign with Elijah Cummings. And so I have all these, I did the national mortgage foreclosure crisis. So I have a lot of sort of left-seeming issues. I'd have to say the one that bothers me the most right now is this whole defund the police concept. I mean, I think we need to, reimagine and be more innovative in how we police in this country. But I think that kind of thing really hurts the Democrats and the Democratic Party because the fact of the matter is crime disproportionately affects communities of color and lower and underserved communities. And so I think that's an example of some of the tension we have right now in the party. So that's one of them.
I agree. I think defund the police is the single worst effort at a bumper sticker to talk about a complex policy issue.
Yes.
Talk about Black Lives Matter and what that's been for you, what your experience in that has been.
Well, so I've been involved in police reform for decades. When I was the head of the NAACP Criminal Justice Committee in Montgomery County in 1989. And then when I was state's attorney, we put every police shooting in the grand jury. We started community prosecution. I worked on diversity on the bench and obviously diversity in my office, both as state's attorney and attorney general. So, the Black Lives Matter movement, it was sort of like, it was obviously wonderful. I mean, it's gotten the dialogue and the discussion about race in this country is incredibly important. And, as I mentioned earlier, Barack Obama's campaign, Senator Elijah Cummings, I ran that and everybody was on the other side. And people say, well, he didn't do enough for the Black community. But the fact of the matter is he really brought this issue into the mainstream dialogue. And it's being discussed at the dog park and everywhere, not just amongst African Americans. And so, yes, this has been going on for 400 years, and thankfully everybody now knows about it. And so as we go forward, as we come out of COVID, as we sort of reestablish society as we know it, Black Lives Matter, I think, has been incredibly important in driving the conversation toward trust in the community, bridging gaps of inequities in public health and housing and education, obviously criminal justice. And because we're talking about politics, I would submit that I'm the only person in the race that has any background whatsoever in criminal justice. I'm probably the only one that knows the difference between a conviction and an indictment. And so going forward in terms of the impetus for Black Lives Matter really was criminal justice. So I can't wait to take that on a statewide level.
I'm going to give you a moment, since you were state's attorney and attorney general, to tell a story about something you did for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Do you have any examples?
Well, it was sort of easy for me because I came in as state's attorney after someone had been there for 30 years, and I came in as attorney general after someone had been there for 20 years. Both older white gentlemen, both very decent, great people, but diversity was not first and foremost on their mind. So when I became state's attorney in Montgomery County, we hired the first Asian American prosecutors in the history of the county. We exponentially increased African American, Latino prosecutors in the county's history, and women. People talk about Black Lives Matter and sort of these issues out there and forget the women issue and gender issue. So by the time I left the state's attorney's office and the attorney general's office, we had more women supervisors than men. And, not because it's like I'm a Democrat and that's what you do, because they were smarter and harder working, frankly, and better judgment. And so, anyway, I guess I would use that. And then in each and every case we always had to use, focus on race issues and make sure that we were focused on diversity. And that's why I put the first domestic violence dockets in when I was state's attorney, and the first drug courts to keep people out of jail that shouldn't be in jail, and to protect. And most of the victims were people of color and communities of color as well.
Okay. When did you first think about running for office? I know it's going to be a very young age.
Very young, very young. I've always thought about it. I was just, I don't know, there wasn't sort of one turnkey moment. There was when I decided to run for attorney general when I was crossing the Chesapeake Bay Bridge once with my kids and said, I want to fix the bay and I want to clean up the bay. And I became the national environmental attorney general for the country. And then I decided to run for governor sort of when I was walking my dogs through Rock Creek Park thinking, what am I doing? I like helping people. I want to help people. And this is a time to do it. And I'm the only a lot of people were saying, and there's something to it, that I'm the only Democrat that could win the primary and the general election in the race. So I thought, you know what, we need a Democrat. We need democratic values. But when I was young, I just sort of always was steered that way. And I thought that politicians, and obviously in the post-Trump world, there's a stain on all politicians, but I thought that was the admirable thing to do and to try and help people.
Yeah, good for you. So you've already said that you don't like labels, but this is a question I'm asking everyone anyway, so hopefully you'll answer this. On a scale of 1 to 100, with 1 being the very, very most conservative right wing and 100 being the very, very most liberal left wing, what number would you use to describe your political philosophy?
It's not that I don't like labels. I don't mind labels. I like my food to be labeled so I know what's in it, for example. But political labels are tough because, I've been called everything from a left-wing communist to, a conservative Democrat. And I like to think that I look at things and sort of do the right thing for the right reasons, articulate those reasons. So I guess to answer your question, because I don't want to be the guy that doesn't answer the question, I'm going to go ahead and say 1 through 50 means you're a Republican, 50 through 100 means you're a Democrat, and I'll go right in the middle at 75.
All right. Very, very politically deduced there. Tell us a shero or hero of yours, living or dead.
Like I said, probably my kids, because they have such a great life in the way they look at the world, and they don't, color and gender and all that is sort of past. Like they never understood. I remember when I was going down to testify about marriage equality years before it passed, they couldn't even understand what the issue was. Like, what do you mean? And so I guess they're the living ones. And Dad, I'd go with sort of a combination because they were best friends in the Senate of Bobby Kennedy and Joe Tidings. I didn't know Bobby Kennedy, I obviously know Kathleen well, but his politics at the time in the moment were something that I just find admirable. And Joe Tidings, who was his best friend in the U.S. Senate, was actually my campaign chairman. Jamie Raskin was for the first 8 years, and then when he ran, Joe Tidings became it. And what he did for Maryland and the way he looked at politics in Maryland, I think it was admirable.
That's great. We have just a few minutes left. Could you make a pitch for a nonprofit organization in Maryland that you support personally?
So I'm on the board of College Track, which is the Kevin Durant program that works in Suitland, Maryland, and gets kids into college. And I'm also on board of Year Up and RAP. And Year Up is a workforce development program for kids that go to college, and it's just phenomenal. They're all over the country. But I'd be remiss if I didn't pick my own nonprofit that I started 12 years ago called Charm City. And it's Charm City Lacrosse, and we have 500 or 600 kids, and then we'll be able to get kids. There was no inner city program for lacrosse, and it's again Maryland's sport, and so we've been able to get kids into high schools and ultimately to college through Charm City. And I personally go every Saturday morning to the program because it's sort of my release. I love working with the young kids in the city, so I have to go with that.
Fantastic, thank you. If there was an enormous windfall of federal funds that came into Maryland and you were governor and you could be the sole decision maker, how would you spend it?
On Kerwin.
Okay. And just explain what that is.
For those who are smart enough to follow this kind of thing all the time. It's a study, a program, a report that was done by Britt Kerwin, and his committee, to really sort of look at education going in the future in Maryland. I mean, people move here and want to be here because of schools, and we have a real checkered number of schools in terms of rural and urban, and it's the future. It will keep Maryland going forward and being the progressive state it is in the future.
Okay, we're getting really low on time. Doug Gansler, former Attorney General and State's Attorney, what is your secret superpower? What is a skill or talent that you have something most folks can't do?
Yeah, I'm just a man of the people, so I don't really have anything that no one else can do. But I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm crazy enough after 23 years in government and politics to be running for governor again in these times. And so I guess most people probably would not subject themselves to that. But I just believe in it. I believe in government. I believe in the power of effectuating positive change. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay. Briefly, any regrets that you want to share?
I have tons of regrets, but nothing that sort of changed anybody's life.
Okay.
So no.
In 28 seconds, anything we didn't cover that you'd like to share here?
No, but thank you for doing this. And you know, you and I go way back, and Montgomery County is going to be really important in this election coming up. We've never had a governor from Montgomery County. So when it was time to get a vaccination center, we wanted it early February. We got it end of April. It matters. Voting matters. Who you elect matters. So please, everyone, make sure you vote in the primary.
There you go. Well, Doug, it's great to chat with you. Thank you for joining me on Kibbitzing with Kagan, and I wish you all the best personally and politically.
Thank you. You too, Cheryl. Appreciate it.
Stay well.